thank you all for being here. I actually wanted to start with something, Hendrik, you brought up to me not too long ago, and that was a quote from, I believe it's the godfather of AI. Is that correct? Geoffrey Hinton?
Yes.
Who said that the pace of development for AI was, quote, very, very fast, much faster than I expected. Interesting to hear that from the godfather of AI, and he actually called for government regulation of the technology. Before we get into the technology, I think the regulation aspect of it is important to dig into, especially when we think about it in the context of the continent. Del, this is your area of focus. Where are we at with the framework and the regulation of AI before we start seeing it applied to practical uses on the continent?
Well, first of all, thank you for hosting us, Jen.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to where Africa is, it's still at its infancy stage. There's this kind of paradox between innovation and regulation. And I believe, from my personal experiences with institutions and government, it's mainly them trying to figure out to create a regulatory framework that is suitable for Africa. Because the problems that we have in Africa are different from the problems outside of Africa, and the solutions that we need to create for Africa are also very different. And so what I have found is that it's usually going in a format of some form of drafts initially, and then working with stakeholders to ensure that they are on the right path, and then that follows with a full-scale framework. And that's typically what I've experienced, not just in AI, but my field that I tend to focus on a little bit more in the blockchain area as well. And so I think they're working hand in hand with it, but they're very, steady. It's a steady journey at the moment.
Hendrik,
May I just join Del here and I speak much more from a financial services perspective. Our business today is more than 2/3 in the developed world or in the rest of the world, but it started in Africa and we still operate. We deploy more money on the African continent owned by other people than anyone else in the world. So, and in the rest of the world, of course. But for me, the point is Africa must, and I was so excited after watching the previous panel, but Africa must develop a regulatory and a policy framework that suits itself and not lift and copy things from either Europe or the US or, for that matter, China. It should do what China did. China developed its own framework, it suited itself, and it grew very well. But my point on AI is a bigger one. It's a case, and it's the Geoffrey Hinton point, it's a case for humanity. How are we going to live as augmented beings? How are we going to live with this technology, which has only started? And I'd like to quote someone else, which is Yuval Noah Harari in his latest book, Nexus, where he equates this to the shifting from hunter-gatherer societies to agrarian societies, the size of the impact of this technology, which will be with us over the next few decades, changing the way we live with technology. And I don't think in a sort of complete dereg world, and I'm not a regulatory type, but I think one has to develop societal policy of how you're going to use this intelligently. Otherwise, we will face unintended consequences. That's just the point.
Thank you, Hendrik. Can you jump in, Derrick, especially because you focus on precision medicine?
Sure.
Is AI beneficial in that case?
Yes, so thank you, Jennifer. And yes, for us it is, in the whole space of regulation, it's a very big area of focus for us. And as a matter of fact, as a precision medicine company, one of the first things we did as a company post-launch was to actually engage with the FDA, and specifically Ghana FDA, to say we have a solution that we want to bring, technology that we're bringing from Europe here, but we don't think that the existing structure allows us to bring this technology in a way that makes scientific sense, but then also makes ethical sense. And so we had to, out of the gate, engage and say the existing structures and frameworks had to be modified to make sense, to allow this technology to come in and have its benefit events into what it is that we want to do. So on our side, AI is a tool, but it's a tool that we have to guard. We have to sort of navigate. It's like having a very sharp, sword. You have to know how to use it so it doesn't become an issue. Specifically in precision medicine, where our focus is on optimizing therapy, finding new and better ways for people who demographically or physiologically haven't been part of the drug development process. It's important knowing that these models, these tools need to be tweaked using local content. From a biological perspective, there's a social construct to it as well as ethical. So for us, using AI right now is a very conservative one, where we take the tool and then have to modify it. Because again, these tools are coming from different parts of the world with different sets of data that have been used. And just like Hendrik said, you can't just transplant these things and expect them to work. And especially so in healthcare, where we only have one chance at this. We can't make a mistake. Yeah. And so for us, this is important, but there's also that process of teaching or enhancing or adapting that tool that works so well somewhere else before putting it out in the market. So we have to be very strategic about that in how we do it. And therefore, I'm just going to add this piece to it. On the Revna Biosciences side, we have as many software developers and data scientists as we do have scientists, as in biological scientists and clinicians. And there's a reason for that. We need that cross-pollination in-house. So the digital framework that we're building, the data that we're collecting, are we asking the right questions? Are we collecting the right data? Are we analyzing these data right so that these models then interpret and do what it is that we need them to do, be it in digital pathology, where we don't have pathologists on the continent, and using these to make gynecologic diagnostics and all of those. So for us, the regulation is important to also help us stay within that framework of that ethical constraint that we work in, which is needed, but then we have to go through a process of essentially adopting these AI solutions to fit what we need them to do.
Thanks for that. Del, is that key to AI being used as a tool for development on the continent? Does it need to be more of a cautious approach than what we're seeing elsewhere in the world?
From an African perspective, no. Because Africa's legacy systems already are behind, right? So the last thing you want to do now is, and obviously I'm biased because I'm an entrepreneur, right? Yeah. So if I'm sitting with a regulator, my job is to push them to be a little bit more, push them out to be a little bit more ambitious, and their job is to try and make sure I'm being slow and steady to make sure that we're all on the same page. But I would say no, because we need to leapfrog, right? We need to be where the ball is going to be in Africa, not where the ball is today. And we also have to take into account, in the last panel, they emphasized on a youthful population. And so if you look at a youthful population, you take, you don't have to be an oracle to know that AI is here to stay, right? Why would you then start to put roadblocks in the way of the youth moving with the speed of the industry? So I would say no. We need to be bold and we need to leapfrog.
Jennifer, let me
jump in. Please.
Yes. So I think context matters here, right? For us, the reason we're saying let's do this in a way, we're not saying we're using AI right now. If you send an infectious disease, say sepsis, sample to us right now, Revna Biosciences, within 6 hours, we'll ID the causative agent and then give you insights into resistance and all of those using some of these AI tools. So we're using it. What we're saying is that even within our service delivery, we do have areas where we know we have to be careful. We have a human patient here who traditionally gets diagnosed late. So this is the problem we're facing. We have a very unstudied population, a population that has been traditionally excluded from drug development. And just for background, my background is in drug development, 15, 16 years, the last 7 with Johnson & Johnson. I know this space quite well. And we've seen instances where medications come, and 4 of us sitting here could take the same medications and we'll react to them very differently. That is what we're trying to solve in the context of patients that don't have access to diagnostics and treatment options. They're diagnosed very late. You won't see some of these diseases or patients in any parts of the world because there's no intervention. Now, for a patient like that comes to us, we have one shot, and they have very little time, right? Yes, it's true we want to throw things at them, but we also want to be very sure that when we go once and that's it, first time and that's it. And to do that, you need a little bit of safeguards because of what we do, our process. It needs to be repeatable, it needs to be reproducible, it needs to be independently verifiable.
Sure.
Now, to do that, you need certain guardrails, not to restrict the tool, but to say, this is the context within which you want to use this, and these are the outcomes you want to see. Yeah. And I think that context needs to come out. We're all for the tools, we love them. In fact, as of next week, we're going to be adding another layer of AI to our service provision because we love it, and we're probably going to be the first in the region doing this service. Goes to show that, yes, we want this, but for our space, in the medical and scientific space, there has to be the safeguard that someone else is putting in, that we're constantly pushing against, just to make sure that the patient gets what they need that first time and done.
Sure, yeah, and it works different. Yeah, Hendrik.
Jen, sorry, I think we can reconcile this, especially at a Bloomberg forum, because you own so much of financial data. So it's quite easy in the financial world, you sort of go buy it from Bloomberg, right? And then you can play with it in your playpen. What happens in the real world, or increasingly in sophisticated and subtle data sets, is you've got to develop your data and guard your data and then use it appropriately. That's the point, because the machine will not distinguish. So again, to quote Harari, he talks about the risk of data colonialism. Because effectively, if you look at the aggregators sit in the US largely and in China, they will collect all the data on everyone at a global level. You don't necessarily have regionally appropriate, and in the medical field, really population appropriate data. In the financial world, it's far easier because it's kind of already transparent and it's there. So I've got a much easier problem than Derrick in using the AI, and I don't think it's regulators who'll necessarily give us the answer. It's just the way we use it to get the correct answer. Because if we get the wrong answer, and this machine is on autopilot moving on, and we don't quite understand how it's evolving itself, it's very difficult to wind back. So I think that's why AI you need to approach it thoughtfully, but you mustn't discount what Del said. You must jump in there and go for it, because entrepreneurs are creating wonderful things. Regulators didn't create the AI revolution.
Hendrik, does that mean you are confident in saying you double down on your investments into the technology?
You see, for us in finance, there's two issues. The one is because to get the people to make the technology part of their daily use, i.e. go faster, better, and find productivity and effectiveness gains. And very clever people sometimes think they're clever enough. Even though they read about it, they talk about it, the internalization we've actually seen practically is something that doesn't always work. The other one is you've got to get your data sets, your organizational data. And we live, like the medical guys, in a highly regulated world. So in our case, client data is regulated by every jurisdiction, and it's going to be worse in the multipolar world. And everyone wants to own it and not own it and that. So you can't just put it in a pot and say, let the machine run, because the regulator may come and fine you. So we have an obligation to regulators. We have to collect our data much more systematically and keep it over time. And then the usage must not be, hey, just give me a quick letter on Copilot. The usage actually must now, and so a lot of an important example for us, because we talk about wanting to be not only tech-enabled but AI-enabled firm, is how do you develop your new talent? I was developed doing heavy lifting, basically carrying bags and building spreadsheets. No one needs you to build a spreadsheet anymore. No one needs you to make a PowerPoint slide anymore. You can just put the data in and get it out, and it's better. So how do you develop your next generation talent to make the judgments that will have to be used on top of the AI? I think we are only starting to even think about the implications, and that's where we should apply our mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give a very real-life example for me when it comes to this whole regulatory aspect of it. So when we were approaching Ghana Central Bank relating to digital assets, right, we had 3 main pillars that we built that journey from. Education and awareness, obviously policy, and then the last pillar is commercialization. Now, one aspect of that you can't really control, but the education and the policy framework you can control. And then what followed with that journey is, and this took the best part of 2.5 to 3 years, and now we have a situation where Ghana actually has they have a date of when this policy goes live around digital assets. And there was a sandbox pilot environment. And I think that could be useful for AI in Africa, particularly. And, they are both right. Everything we're saying can coexist. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to the medical field, you have to be, you have to be precise as a pilot on a plane, right? There's no room for failure.
Right.
But at the same time, there needs to be an environment that's healthy and allows ambitious entrepreneurs to explore and have the regulator see what the pros and cons are. Because the problem is you can't be certain about everything you think you know, right? And you won't find that out unless you create an environment for that to happen.
Can we just finish off, Dal, maybe, and maybe I'll get all 3 of your takes. Best case scenario for AI in Africa and also EM more broadly, practically, what is the best case that we'll see AI in a practical use case over the next 3 to 5 years? What's your hope?
My hope, at least from the medical side, and I strongly believe this, is that if we deploy AI the right way, issues with cancer diagnostics, for instance, should be solvable, in half of that time, because AI is helping or basically addressing some of the issues we have with shortage of pathologists to read slides, where we know 80–90% of them, will be negative when we're talking specifically in cervical cancer screening, for instance. So if we don't have the people, but we have tools that will give you 99.9% of the time the accurate negative ones, so that the few pathologists you have can then focus on the remaining 10% or so that may be positive that they need to adjudicate, then you're beginning to see. So I personally believe that AI on the diagnostic side is very close for us to use to solve a lot of our problems. And then on the therapeutic side as well, we're not too far away at all. Because of the diversity we have, or genomically, we should be able to pick out those key traits that we need to optimize existing therapy while prepping for the next gen one. So I am very optimistic, but of course, within a certain cautious boundaries.
Hendrik?
I'm very excited about the solution of real-world problems, i.e. getting research time, which wouldn't have been justified in labs on the West Coast or East Coast of the US because the problem was deemed too small or the economic outcome wasn't good enough. So real farmers, enabling weak states to operate really well. I mean, you could digitize and technology enable the weakest developing country states into something really special without turning them into the surveillance state. I think the downside is, and I think where I'm quite bullish about Africa in particular in emerging markets, because Africans aren't spoiled. So all these reasonably unproductive, very expensive white-collar jobs in the West, we are going to lose lots and lots of them, and everyone can't become a yoga instructor, right? Africans are kind of not in that food chain and therefore will adjust in a way which is faster and better. But I worry about the general migration from manufacturing jobs and, to which may be supplanted by robots in the developed world, to the services jobs that would have been exported to the developing world, a sort of India Bangalore story. That may not happen again. Think about how many software developers Microsoft fired, but think of the people behind those software developers. For each one of them, there's probably 10 of them in India, other places which do it. And I don't know the answer. So there's an up and a downside. But I think Africa, because it's used to being tough, and Africans are very flexible, can probably deal with it better than any other part of the world.
Okay, Del, maybe in 20 seconds.
Oh, right.
Sorry,
Yeah, I think ultimately Africa needs to focus on education first.
Okay.
And the whole reason behind that is because you have powers like China and the USA who will build the biases on data that if we don't take care, we'll have to follow. And so the only way that we are going to supersede that is build the education system right now and ensure that we have talent to be able to meet the demands that Africa has, so that we're not in a situation where we're relying on compounded data biases.
Wonderful. Well, hopefully we're getting very close to that. Really appreciate this conversation. We could speak for a while, but we have to leave it there. Thank you all so much.